History has given us great leaders, visionaries, reformers, unifiers. And then, there are the ones who looked at power and thought, you know what this needs? More fear. Today we're looking at 7 rulers whose names became synonymous with brutality. Not cartoon villains, not movie characters, real people, with real power, who made very real decisions, and left behind very real suffering. Let's begin. Remember to like and subscribe. Adolf Hitler didn't just rule Germany. He built a system, a machine, a regime centered on racial ideology and expansion. Under his rule, 6 million Jews were murdered in the Holocaust. Millions of others, Roma, disabled people, political opponents, were persecuted and killed. World War II led to over 60 million deaths worldwide. This wasn't chaotic violence. It was organized. There were departments, paperwork, train schedules. When genocide has administrative offices, something has gone very wrong. And the terrifying part? It was carried out through bureaucracy. History lesson number 1. Evil doesn't always look chaotic. Sometimes it wears a suit. By 1945, the empire he claimed would last 1,000 years had collapsed in just 12. And the man who demanded absolute loyalty ended up hiding underground. History has a sense of irony. Joseph Stalin didn't start as a dramatic dictator. He didn't burst onto the scene with fiery speeches and theatrical gestures. He started as a strategist. Quiet, calculating, patient. The kind of man who preferred backroom meetings to public rallies. After Lenin's death in 1924, the Soviet Union didn't immediately fall into chaos. It entered a power struggle. And Stalin didn't win it by being the loudest. He won it by being the most methodical. He positioned allies, isolated rivals, reassigned enemies, promoted loyalists. One by one, competitors like Trotsky were sidelined, exiled, or eliminated. Not with public theatrics. With paperwork. Once firmly in control, the paranoia escalated. Because consolidating power wasn't enough. He needed to keep it. The Great Purge of the late 1930s meant that anyone could be accused of treason. Military generals, party officials, writers, engineers, ordinary citizens. If your name appeared on a list, that was usually the end of the discussion. And those lists were long. Confessions were often forced. Trials were staged. Verdicts were predetermined. Millions were sent to gulags, labor camps in freezing, brutal conditions where survival depended on strength, luck, and sometimes both. Meanwhile, forced collectivization policies aimed to modernize agriculture rapidly. The result? Widespread famine. Entire villages starved. Grain was exported while citizens went hungry. And still, publicly, the system claimed success. Official newspapers spoke of productivity, of progress, of triumph. Reality was different. Stalin built a government where fear was the operating system. Trust collapsed. Neighbors informed on neighbors. Colleagues avoided eye contact. Even jokes became dangerous. Because in a system built on suspicion, humor could be interpreted as dissent. And dissent had consequences. In the end, when Stalin suffered a stroke in 1953, even his own guards hesitated to enter his room. They were afraid of disturbing him without permission. Think about that. A ruler so feared that even in silence, he commanded paralysis. That's what happens when fear replaces loyalty. And when a nation runs on fear long enough, it forgets what trust feels like. Pol Pot, leader of the Khmer Rouge, believed Cambodia needed a radical reset. Not reform, not gradual improvement. A reset. His solution? Empty the cities. Abolish money. Eliminate intellectuals. Destroy modern institutions. Basically, uninstall society and hope it reboots better. In 1975, Phnom Penh, a city of over 2 million people, was emptied almost overnight. Hospitals were cleared. Schools were shut down. Patients were forced onto the roads. The official explanation? Temporary evacuation. It wasn't temporary. Millions were marched into rural labor camps. Families were separated. Children were placed in indoctrination groups. Parents were assigned to agricultural units. Trust between people eroded quickly because loyalty to the regime was everything. Education was dismantled. Books were burned. Universities closed. Professionals targeted. Anyone suspected of intellectualism, even wearing glasses, could be labeled a threat. Glasses. Because apparently clear vision was suspicious. Execution sites later became known as the killing fields. Between 1975 and 1979, an estimated 1.5 to 2 million people died. Nearly a quarter of Cambodia's population. The cruelty wasn't random. It was ideological. Pol Pot believed he could purify society by erasing complexity. He wasn't just punishing enemies. He was trying to reshape humanity itself. To build a perfectly controlled, agrarian utopia. What he built instead was devastation. In 1979, Vietnam invaded Cambodia and the regime collapsed. Pol Pot fled into the jungle, continuing guerrilla resistance for years. Eventually, he was placed under house arrest by his own former allies. He died in 1998, never facing full international justice. A man who tried to redesign society from scratch ended his life hiding from the consequences of it. History sometimes delivers dramatic endings. Sometimes it delivers quiet ones. Neither erases the damage left behind. Caligula began his reign in 37 AD with public support. Rome was hopeful. He was young, charismatic, popular, the son of a beloved general. For a moment, the empire thought, finally, stability. Then he fell seriously ill early in his rule. Ancient writers describe a near-death experience. And when he recovered, something changed. Executions increased. Not dramatic public massacres, but quiet removals. Political rivals disappeared. Critics found themselves accused of treason. Suddenly, loyalty wasn't optional. It was mandatory. Extravagant spending escalated. He drained the treasury on games, feasts, and massive construction projects designed less for governance and more for spectacle. Floating palaces, lavish banquets, public displays of wealth. It was less responsible emperor and more Roman reality show. He reportedly demanded worship as a living god. Now, Romans were used to emperors being powerful, but declaring yourself divine while still alive? That was bold. Even by imperial standards. Public funds were treated like a personal allowance. Taxes rose. Financial strain increased. Meanwhile, Rome's political elite lived in fear. Senators were mocked, forced to run beside his chariot, publicly humiliated. Power became performance. And when power turns theatrical, stability suffers. Now, historians debate exaggerations in ancient sources, especially the more sensational claims. The famous story that he planned to appoint his horse, Incitatus, as consul? It may have been satire. It may have been symbolic. It may have been ancient Roman sarcasm. But here's the key. Even if exaggerated, his rule clearly destabilized the empire. The treasury weakened. Political trust collapsed. The line between emperor and tyrant blurred. And when leaders begin confusing authority with entertainment, institutions start cracking. In 41 AD, members of his own Praetorian Guard assassinated him. Not invading armies. Not foreign enemies. His personal security detail. Sometimes tyranny drags on for decades. Sometimes it burns bright, chaotic, and fast. Caligula ruled for just 4 years. For years. A reminder that absolute power doesn't always decay slowly. Sometimes it implodes. Idi Amin seized power in Uganda in 1971 through a military coup. At first, some Ugandans welcomed him. After years of political instability, he seemed decisive, strong, confident. The kind of leader who walks into a room and doesn't ask for permission. For a brief moment, people thought, maybe this will bring order. It did. Just not the kind they hoped for. Very quickly, repression replaced optimism. Amin expelled tens of thousands of Asian Ugandans, many of whom were business owners and professionals, giving them just 90 days to leave. The result? The economy collapsed almost overnight. When you remove a large portion of your commercial backbone, things tend to stop functioning. Shops closed. Industries stalled. Inflation soared. But economic damage was only part of the story. Political opponents were arrested. Many were tortured. Many were killed. Estimates suggest between 100,000 and 300,000 people died under his rule. That's not instability. That's systemic terror. And yet, Amin cultivated a bizarre public persona. He gave himself elaborate titles like His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, VC, DSO, MC, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea. It's less a title and more a paragraph. He projected bravado, smiled for cameras, made theatrical speeches. But beneath the performance was repression. He maintained power through military control and fear. Opposition didn't debate him. It disappeared. Eventually, Amin made a strategic miscalculation. He invaded Tanzania in 1978. The war did not go well. Tanzanian forces pushed back. Ugandan exiles joined them. By 1979, Amin's regime collapsed. He fled into exile, first Libya, then Saudi Arabia, and there he lived out his life, quietly. No dramatic trial. No cinematic showdown. A brutal reign. A surprisingly quiet ending. History doesn't always deliver dramatic justice. Sometimes it just turns the page. Ivan IV became the first Tsar of Russia. Not just a prince. Not just a ruler. A czar. The title itself signaled absolute authority. Early in his reign, he actually showed promise. He implemented legal reforms, reorganized parts of the military, expanded trade, strengthened central authority. For a while, it looked like Russia was stabilizing under strong leadership. Then tragedy struck. His wife, Anastasia, one of the few people he deeply trusted, died unexpectedly. Ivan believed she had been poisoned. Whether true or not, suspicion took root. And suspicion, when paired with absolute power, becomes dangerous. His rule darkened. Paranoia intensified. He began to see betrayal everywhere. Nobles became suspects. Advisors became threats. Entire cities became potential enemies. He created the Oprichnina, a separate state apparatus with its own army. This wasn't just a security force. It was a loyalty machine. The Oprichniki dressed in black, rode black horses, carried symbols meant to represent sweeping away treason. Subtle? Not exactly. They terrorized nobles and citizens alike. Property was confiscated. Families were exiled. Executions became public warnings. The massacre of Novgorod in 1570 stands as one of the most infamous events of his reign. Ivan accused the city of plotting against him. Thousands were executed or drowned. Whether the conspiracy was real remains doubtful. The fear, however, was very real. Ivan's rage was personal as well as political. In 1581, during an argument, he struck his own son in anger. The injury proved fatal. The image of Ivan cradling his dying heir, immortalized in paintings, became symbolic of a ruler consumed by his own volatility. A man who conquered territories, but couldn't control himself. He expanded Russian territory significantly, laid foundations for future imperial growth, but at immense human cost. Power in his hands was not just authority, it was emotion amplified. And when emotion governs empire, stability rarely survives. King Leopold II of Belgium never ruled the Congo as a traditional colony at first. He controlled it personally. Under the guise of humanitarian development, he established forced labor systems to extract rubber. Villagers were required to meet quotas. Failure often resulted in brutal punishments, including mutilation. Millions died from violence, starvation, and disease. Photographs eventually exposed the atrocities. International pressure forced Belgium to annex the territory from Leopold's personal control in 1908. But the damage had already been done. Colonial exploitation on this scale reshaped Central Africa for generations. Sometimes the most devastating rulers aren't battlefield conquerors. They're economic ones. If you want more deep dive history explained clearly and engagingly,
subscribe.
Comment the next topic you want explored. And remember, the most dangerous moments in history are often when people stop asking questions. See you in the next one.